Welcome. Good morning. Happy Friday.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This week at CFSA. Hey, y'all. My name is Jerry Cates. I am the community mobilizer at the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. I'm on our policy team. And I'm very excited to be joined this morning by three friends of mine across the state of North Carolina to talk about food waste issues and climate change, how it affects climate change. So very excited to be here. The week of Earth Day. We have some other exciting things coming up this month related to food waste that we're going to talk about. But we're going to get into a conversation. So welcome, y'all.
Thanks.
Good.
Happy to be here.
Great. So we have Carl Vierling with us. He is the executive director of the Greater High Point Food Alliance. Carl, how are you doing this morning?
Good, Jared. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. Happy to see you. We have Caitlin Cummins. She's the coordinator of the Pitt County Farm Food Council. Caitlin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here.
And we have Flori Pate, the executive director of Food Connection. Flori, how are you?
Good. It's a beautiful day here in Asheville, North Carolina.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we're going to get into a conversation for about the next 20 or 30 minutes. We're excited to chat with you all. We're going to kind of open up and just kind of get into like the meat of our discussion. What is food waste and recovery? Food waste and recovery is a hot topic these days, as we know that about 40% of food grown in the United States is not consumed and actually goes to waste. So Caitlin, could you maybe just kick us off and just tell us a little bit about food waste in general? Like, why is it an issue? How does it impact climate change? And I don't know, maybe talk about some activities that that folks can take to reduce food waste.
Yeah, sure. So food waste is a huge issue on climate change, on food security, on loads of pockets of our food system. As most of you know, when you put your food waste in the trash, it ends up in a landfill. Once it gets into the landfill, it decomposes down into an acidic solution, which can leach off heavy metals from other waste in the landfill and leads to water pollution. It also breaks down into methane gas, which is a greenhouse gas that is even more potent than carbon dioxide. And, you know, all of that nasty stuff happens in the landfill, but I think it's really important to consider the whole life cycle of a food product. So food waste in its natural form out in, you know, Mother Nature's rainforest, this is what it looks like. So say an apple grows on a tree, an animal goes and picks the apple off the tree, takes a couple bites, decides it's done, it falls onto the floor. And then the worms and little microorganisms are like, man, my time for lunch. So they have their go at it. They eat the little apple. They're all done. Bellies are full. And then the soil's like, awesome, lunchtime. So then the apple breaks down into the soil and all of those nutrients are absorbed and they have the opportunity to promote and support the growth of new apple trees, which is really cool. Take an apple in our global food system and it looks completely different. So apple is grown on a tree. It always starts the same way. And then it goes from a farm to a distribution center, to a grocery store, to your car, to your home, to your refrigerator, maybe to your belly, a lot of times into your trash. And then from the trash, if you're lucky, it goes directly to the landfill, but most of the time, or a lot of the time, it goes to a transfer station and then to the landfill. So if you consider the amount of carbon dioxide that's emitted just during transportation of that food to the landfill, it's enormous. And then the apple gets thrown into the landfill, and that's where the buck stops as far as his productive life. Then it just creates methane, and that apple doesn't even get the opportunity to, go back to its roots into the soil and promote the growth of new life, and also when new life is formed by way of growth of trees and bushes and flowers, those plants take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So you're really just like knocking off a whole lot of that productivity that apple has to offer when you're just dumping it in the landfill. So it's really unfortunate, but that's kind of like in general what bad food waste looks like.
And it also, as it's going into the landfill, it's entering into this system that is then trapped and is, not decomposing in a natural way, and it's, creating methane in a way that, some landfills, may trap and fuel some small fleet with, but is not, a cycle that like you are describing. So, and it's contaminated with everything else that's in the landfill. Then it cannot be, those nutrients are gone. It cannot be reused again. Well, we're going to hear a little bit from Flori in a second about food recovery and her work on the ground in Asheville and elsewhere. But what are some things? I know the food councils are kind of talking about food waste right now, of the network of food councils in North Carolina that you all are part of. So what are some like activities that folks can engage in to mitigate food waste quickly, Caitlin?
So some of the things that we really like to focus are composting. So putting the food waste back into the soil by way of composting. Food waste recovery for human consumption, so foods that are still edible and safe to eat. We want to make sure our neighbors are being fed. And then food waste recovery for animal feed. So, bring it to your local farmer who has chickens or goats or pigs or whatever, and they would love to eat your carrot tops and your lettuce bottoms.
Absolutely. And that's, I think the network of CFSA has a lot of folks who are composting, and a lot of farmers, and some farmers you have to follow certain regulations on heating prepared food scraps before it's fed the animals. But yeah, those are all perfect examples of ways to kind of reuse those nutrients, reuse those instead of having to go into landfill and create more methane and be trucked all around. Well, thank you, Caitlin. We're going to come back and hear from you in a little bit about some efforts from the Food Council Network. But Flori, so glad to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about your work and your organization and what y'all do?
Sure. Well, since y'all are all from North Carolina, you're familiar with Asheville's culinary scene. We are a destination town. There are weddings almost every night of the week here. And that creates a lot of food. And so what we do specifically is we rescue unserved food from catered events, institutions like universities, and we connect that to local nonprofit partners that feed people in need. I know this discussion is not about hunger, but in Buncombe County, 1 in 4 people don't have enough to eat. As Jared mentioned, 40% of our food supply in our country ends up in the trash, which creates the methane gas, like Caitlin said. So really, in the United States, nobody should be going hungry. The problem is the connecting part. So we are Food Connection, and we make those connections to people. And you might be wondering, well, why do these catered events have so much leftover food? Well, if you are having a really nice party and say you have 100 people RSVP that they're coming, that kitchen is going to make food for probably 110, 115 people in case people are especially hungry. And then say, 20 people don't show up. You have a lot of unserved food. And so that it's not the kitchen's fault, but you can't run out of food at events like this. And then at the university, they have a buffet, and they might think, well, everybody will love our artichoke risotto. Well, it turns out nobody wanted it that day, so there's leftover food there. So Food Connection solves the problem by being the connector, as I said, and we work with a local taxi company here, AVL Ride, and if you're in a 4-mile radius of the epicenter of downtown Asheville, you can text AVL Ride day or night, and they'll send a taxi to go pick up the food and take it to one of the shelters that has 24-hour care there where they can receive the food and go right into cold storage. But But it was interesting when we started this 6 years ago. What was very apparent when we were talking to restaurant partners is that everybody has the misconception that it's illegal to donate fresh food. So the very first thing we did is really dive in and say, well, is this illegal? And we discovered a federal protection called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act. And it says if you're operating in good faith that the food you're donating is safe, that frees you of any liability. And y'all, I don't know if you've heard of that law, but it was passed in 1996 under the Bill Clinton administration, and nobody knows about it, which is incredibly unfortunate. And once we tell these people who've been in the food industry for decades that there's protection and they can solve a problem and feed people, they can even get a write-off on their taxes for these food donations, and it protects the planet. It's such a win-win situation, and it's a model that we would love to replicate other places, because no fresh food should end up in the landfill for multiple reasons. But number one, and in our opinion, it should not end up there when people are going hungry.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned the Bill Emerson Act, and you're getting into the policy side of things, which y'all know the policy wonk. So, and we're going to hear more from Carl about that. And I think y'all really have led the way in kind of creating the resources that you all had around standard operating procedures and kind of like that help for your partners to help them understand how they could donate food according to the rules and regulations, and help them understand how they are protected by the Bill Emerson Act. So and I think y'all have done such a solid job on that, Flori. One thing we do here is that, well, the Bill Emerson Act has never been tested in court, so there's still worry, and that's true. But I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, theoretically, it hasn't gone to court, so it hasn't been tested. So it could get a court case and get tested. But it is the protection for businesses to donate food, and people need to know that they have the legal protection there.
And I'll interject one thing, Jared, and that is we started 6 years ago. And we have delivered over 300,000 fresh meals. And I mean, I'm talking crab cake, brisket, like all the best food in Asheville. We've delivered over 300,000 meals, and that's kept an estimated 150 metric tons of fresh food out of our Buncombe County landfill. And we've never gotten a call that someone said, yeah, but that crab cake was just kind of, I mean, never. People are just grateful. They open their doors, they get the food, they distribute it. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense, I think.
And you talked about replicating. I'm sorry. Have y'all expanded to Charlotte recently?
We actually were contacted by a group of women in Charlotte that said they were interested in replicating our model. My first thought is, in a city that's as large as Charlotte in Mecklenburg County, where there is also a severe hunger issue, are you sure that nobody is rescuing fresh food from the 4 universities there, from all the banks and the Panthers Stadium? And there wasn't. And so we mentored them for a year, and they are their own nonprofit now called Feeding Charlotte. And we're very proud of that. And we would love to be able to expand this and just kind of tell people how we've done it and our successes and things that don't work so well that we've learned from trial and error.
That's fantastic. So folks can get up with you, and y'all are willing to share what you've learned and spread the good word. That's fantastic. And I want to bring it back. You opened up saying this conversation isn't about hunger. And I mean, the focus of our month at CFSA this month is climate change, but hunger, climate, as you said, it's all interconnected. I mean, if people are not eating this food, it is going into the landfill and contributing to climate change. So it's all interconnected here. So thank you so much, Flori. So I'm gonna hand it over to Carl. Carl, and your work at the Greater High Point Food Alliance. I've been working with you and been supporting a conversation over at Community Food Strategies since about 2018, when the network of food councils and y'all and Guilford and High Point kind of realized there were some issues related to what Flori was just talking about, related to concerns and confusion over food waste recovery policy. So, Carl, do you want to kind of tell us a little bit about that history, what those challenges were, and kind of the conversation that's been going on for the past couple of years?
Yeah, what happened was that we had organizations who were actually recovering food from schools and different places, and all of a sudden it got shut down. And it was a way that the health department was interpreting a set of instructions that came out. And so we raised this issue, got Jared involved in it, and we started talking with groups across the state. And one of the things that we found is that each county has its own interpretation of food safety. And they're all looking at it a little bit differently. You have some counties are really good to work with, some counties are really strict. And my background's out of manufacturing, and I'm used to standardized procedures. Everything should be the same. And you would expect in North Carolina that all 100 counties would be interpreting policy and guidelines exactly the same. It really is up to the individual and the health department and how they're interpreting it. And so we've started addressing this. And so how do we go about doing this? And a big part of this is not only about feeding people, but it is about cutting down on what's going into the landfill. One of the things that we don't talk enough about around policy issues is that landfill space is at a premium. So the more you expand landfills, the less that you have for agriculture, the less that you have for development, and then you've got less and less people wanting to build around these landfills. So there's a lot of things that are involved with this. But by establishing standard operating procedures, by doing it the same, then we're going to be able to recover more and more food. I appreciate what Flori and Caitlin have both said about the amount of food going into landfills. Well, the Greater High Point Greensboro MSA is number 14 in the nation right now when it comes to food hardship. And so we've got three metropolitan areas in North Carolina are in the top 15. And so we've got a real issue with this. And so how do we address this? And one way is by recovering food. But it's also, as we develop standard operating procedures, it gives the local restaurants and caterers assurance that they're doing it the right way. It also helps those that are trying to recover the food. The food that's being recovered oftentimes is going to after-school programs, or it's meeting a need with our seniors. And so the other thing that we found as we were doing this is that every county has different resources allocated to this, different amounts of information about how you can recover food. What are the programs that are out there? And so that was stark. I have to tell you, as we were looking at the report that showed all this, one of the poorest counties in North Carolina is Richmond County, and they probably have the best website for how to recover food. And you compare that to other, right? That was I lived in Richmond County. I was shocked by that one. So, but it's about consistency. And then it's also about advocating for the impact it has on our state and raising awareness about that. And that's been one of the things that we've been doing, is trying to raise awareness about the impact on the state. And then I think as we do this, it can also lead into conversations at the federal level around some of the policies of the USDA and school systems and the kinds of foods that you can, how you can recover that food as well. Because there are a lot of policies out there that really hinder. I would suggest anybody, you want an experience, go volunteer at your local school cafeteria for a couple of days, and your eyes will be open around food policy and food policy recovery.
That's the truth. And that's, can't do that very easily these days. Maybe wait till next year to do that volunteering. But yeah, I mean, so Carl, you talking about standard operating procedures, and Flori was talking about the confusion about restaurants and donating leftover food, or caterers and donating leftover food, and that was kind of the crux of the issue. Was that some health departments would say, oh yes, you can donate leftover food in this way, that's safe according to regulation, and other health departments would say, no, you can't do that. You're breaking regulation by donating leftover food. And so Carl and the food councils and Caitlin and others have been talking for the past 2 years, like, how do we get some standard operating procedures that the Department of Health and Human Services recognizes as needed, and get those distributed out, across people who are doing this recovery and to health departments, so they know how this is actually done. And then how do we raise awareness, generally about the issue? So Carl and Caitlin and Flori and others have been really engaging in this conversation with the State Food Council in North Carolina, the North Carolina Local Food Council. And they've done a ton of research. Carl mentioned this report that did this whole, survey of every county looking at how they shared that information. And then they went to DHHS and said, hey, like, here's the issue. We have some allies with us in Cooperative Extension who are willing to develop these standard operating procedures if we can identify some funding to do it. And DHHS said, yeah, if you can find some funding, we'll sign off on it, and let's do this together. And so that's kind of where it's at right now. And so I think that's just an amazing, story of the Food Council Network identifying an issue, working with Community Strategies and CFSA as part of that, and then going to the State Food Council and saying, hey, can you be a bridge to some conversations at the state level? That happening, and then everyone agreeing, like, yes, we can do this together if we can identify, $50,000 in funding. So it's just been great to work with you all on that effort, and hopefully here, fingers crossed, we'll have some funding soon that can maybe help that be a reality. So Carl, thank you so much for that. So another part that Carl mentioned is that raising awareness. So another effort that the food councils have done to raise awareness was to do a petition, basically, to ask people to sign on in support of creating a Stop Food Waste, Prevent Food Waste Month. And that plan kind of shifted here, but we have some things to celebrate around that. So Caitlin, do you want to kind of tell us about Food Waste Friday and also Stop Food Waste Day? Like, how are folks celebrating those things in the Food Council Network? And then, like, how can other folks get involved if they want to?
Yeah, so Stop Food Waste Day is coming up on April 28th. So throughout the month of April, we have all been working on a social media campaign to raise awareness around what food waste looks like here in North Carolina and what are some ways people can help. What are some of those action items you can take to help reduce that food waste? So every Friday we have been posting information using hashtag Food Waste Friday. So if you go onto Instagram and look up hashtag Food Waste Friday, you will see some really wonderful green graphics that have been posted over the last 3 weeks. The first week was about food waste by the numbers, what it looks like in North Carolina. The second week was about composting. Last week was about food waste recovery for human consumption. So, what can you do to donate that extra food that you have, or what can restaurants do with all of those leftovers? And then today will be food waste recovery for animal feed. And so that stuff will be going out right after this meeting. And I will drop my email in the comment section. So if you guys want those graphics, just shoot me an email and I will definitely get those out to you. So along with this Food Waste Friday social media campaign, we have asked food councils across the state to just, raise awareness, talk to your food banks, talk to your local restaurateurs, and just figure out what works in your community to raise awareness and what tiny steps can you take to make this better for our state.
That's so awesome, Caitlin. And it's so great to see food councils from Greenville to High Point and beyond, coordinating on efforts like this and raising awareness and working with other partners. And, Stop Food Waste Day was declared by the governor, and is an effort of Compass Group and Refed and some other partners, and the food councils are now joining in on that effort officially. So everyone's celebrating next week, correct? So folks can check out information online for Stop Food Waste Day on April 28th to find out how they can get involved. And there's like a day of some things happening, some virtual talks that you can join in as well. So excited to get that proclamation from the governor and for the Food Council Network to continue to build these relationships with other folks who are also engaged in these issues. So I just want to thank you all again for being here. I know y'all are busy folks. Caitlin's got to get back to farmers market. Carl's got to get back to giving out grants to a bunch of folks so they can have cool bots and freezers and walk-ins. And Flori's got to get on to go recover some food. So I know y'all are busy, so I'll let you get back to your days. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the work that you do in community. And look forward to continuing to work with you all.
Thanks so much, Jared.
Thank you, Jared.
I appreciate it.